Video game is huge in the 21st century. The surging industry has never stopped to deliver masterpieces to gamers that keeps on pushing the boundaries of what games can do. Graphics are getting more and more realistic, maps are larger and larger, gaming mechanisms are more and more complex, and not to mention the expansion of what the concept of game contains. Game can be a form of entertainment, virtual interactive piece of art, platforms of competitive sports, and also virtual worlds for gamers to socialize without physical barriers. But wait a second. Who are those video games made for? Considering the immense amount of gamers around, and the pervasiveness of gaming culture, video games should be for everyone, or at least for everyone who wished to give it a try, right? Unfortunately, no. Although gamers like myself can basically grab any game and go straight ahead to play them, video games are by design majorly ableist. Playing games encompasses complex human-machine interaction. Gamers interact with most games in three circulatory processes: gathering information, processing information, and input information. The information gathering process implies obtaining information from the game. And after that, gamers are expected to process information they just obtained and decide, often in a very short time frame, what to input in the game for their next steps. This whole process may be intuitive and natural for most gamers, but underlying which is the challenges such processes poses to multiplicity of gamers' physical abilities. In contemporary video games, 99% of the time, games deliver information to gamers via audio and visual representations, be it practical informations like character status and footsteps of enemies, or peripheral information like music and visual effects. Gamers with visual and hearing impairments will lose access to a large portion of them. In the processing stage, gamers will be confronted with either quick-time reactions or heavy thought processes, depending on how challenging the game is intended to be. Gamers with cognitive impairments, those who find it hard to read or those who just think and react not as fast, will suffer from the defeat and potentially lose access to other contents the game has to offer. The input stage, on the other hand, everyone, not just gamers, has been dealing with the legacy of early technologies. The keyboard layout has seen minimal changes for more than a century, and game controllers has been made to a similar design for decades, which deprived the right to game from many with motion impairments. Losing the ability to play video games does not equate with losing a form of entertainment. As I mentioned in the beginning, it implies the further marginalization and exclusion of disabled people from the society, for they are losing connection with an influential culture, a surging economy, and an emerging virtual world. And this situation matters now more than ever, since those big companies keep telling us we're on the verge of this metaverse. To the credit of the industry, developers has been making more and more games more and more accessible. The Xbox hardware team has came up with the Xbox Adaptive Controller, which is great for helping motor-impaired gamers to customize controls to their comfort. And accessible settings has been appearing in more and more games. However, current developments are still far from being perfectly inclusive, not to mention universality. Also, the actual everyday experiences of these developments by disabled players are still much underrepresented. The image voices of users are invaluable treasure to design processes. They can assess current effort for future improvement and also facilitate innovations beyond the status quo. And to me, that's where ethnographically informed knowledge can contribute to making more inclusive designs of not only the final product, but also the design process itself and mindsets of designers. This video is a short report on my brief fieldwork in multiple sites, including the Northern Ireland Visually Impaired Gamer Group seminar hosted weekly by RNIB, the Royal National Institute of Blind People. Apart from joining the meeting, I also interviewed 2 members within the group. And in addition to that, I also watched various YouTube contents created by the community of disabled gamers. This video is far from being comprehensive, but it will portray a picture of how things are currently and suggest for potential directions for the futures. If you're interested in exploring more, the links in the video and the instructions section will take you to further resources. As a gaming enthusiast and an anthropology student studying video games, I assume myself to have abundant knowledge to different aspects of gaming scene. However, as I approached the field of accessible gaming, I came to realize the limitation of my knowledge. Resources I came across regarding accessible gaming consisted mostly of official promotion materials from developers' end, mentioning only the progress they brought into the industry, while actual players' experiences haven't received as much attention. During the interview, Harold, a retired gamer who has retinopathy and on the autism spectrum, has explained to me what role video game plays in his life.
Also, I have a few other friends who are long-term elder disabled as well, who game too. So there's always people there to play with. And we enjoy the escapism of going into video games because there are certain aspects of our own life we can't get involved in. But whenever you're running around in a giant mech armor saving the world, you know, your ability to see as well as everyone else or even walk goes out the window. So gaming for me is a real kind of social leveler. There are guys that I've been playing with recently didn't even know I had sight problems because I appeared to be a confident, highly experienced player, despite the minor disability that causes me issues in playing games. And I also like the fact that you can have roles within a group where people's strengths and weaknesses and people's gaming choices can affect, so that instead of having, you know, if you're in a good company or clan or whatever the name is in that particular game, if you have a strength, you can play to your strengths and you can do that. And if you have weaknesses, other people can cover you for that. So, you know, that's like this. The strange thing is in my clan, the blind guy is the sniper.
Right.
So it's the guy who has the sight problems is the person who works on Overwatch and sniping, because I have problems keeping things in focus. I get little tracers and stuff like that. So if I'm very steady on the screen and I have, you know, use very clear tunnel vision, I can see quite well. But this is a mess. So anything that you do that, I get confused. So I can't go close up in a game, or I normally will just die on the spot. Whereas if I'm far away, I can pick and choose and help my friends while they're going and doing that.
Harry's story made me realize that in addition to entertainment or art, video games can also be tools and infrastructures capable in fulfilling real-life needs. However, my fieldwork revealed that the accessibility to such infrastructures are still largely limited by their disabilities. Harold, who is partially sighted, have the choice of playing latest AAA shooting games with accessibility features like changing color schemes and highlighting enemies. However, I noticed that some members in the group chat have far less games to choose from because they are completely blind. When I mentioned popular games like League of Legends, I found that many members don't have the up-to-date knowledges to the industry. Games that they have experiences in are either games that are played before they lost their sight, and games that are specifically designed for people with sight loss. As Stephen, the Technology for Life coordinator of RNIB, told me in the interview.
So before I lost my eyesight, I was playing the PS2 and a wee bit on the actual PC. So, for example, I used to play helicopter games, military helicopter games. Um, I used to play a lot of, for example, Delta Force, so single player games. But now most of my games would actually be, say, on the iPhone, so there'd be audio. So I would play, for example, a game. It's no longer supported, unfortunately. It's a zombie game, so you would actually shake the phone to throw a zombie dog off you, or maybe fire a gun. So you would swipe up or down to reload it and fire again.
Right. So
Just single shooter games, basically, whenever I can get them. But a lot of the games, unfortunately, for people who are sight lost. I mean, when I say people sight lost, I'm talking about totally blind here. There are few and far between, and it's trying to get one that is fully accessible. And unfortunately, unless they're specially designed by a blind developer or someone who knows a blind person, then they're not really that great.
the gaming industry has been making efforts to make games more accessible to more gamers. Two exemplary achievements would be Xbox Adaptive Controller, which can be effectively elevate problems gamers with motor impairments have interacting with games. While providing simplified basic controls, the adaptive controller also supports customization that will cater to individual conditions. On the software end, The Last of Us Part 2 is the all-in-one accessible game that integrated almost all accessible features that partially presented in other games, like customizable color schemes, resizable menus, audio cues, detailed difficulty settings, and display schemes that cater for different types of visual impairments. When I asked Harold and Stephen about their opinion, they kind of have a mixed feeling about this.
There seems to be a varying commitment at various levels. Because I'm an Xbox player, they have been spending time making a big deal about their accessibility, that they have they've put accessibility features onto the console, they have accessibility features on the PC, they have curated lists of games designed for accessibility. So I noticed games for autistic people, simple one-button games for people who have mobility issues and things like that. I am even impressed that they've got a logo of what looks like an old Super NES controller, where one side of it is the disability symbol for someone in a wheelchair. I'm very impressed with what on the surface looks like a commitment to doing this.
I find, like, for example, Poker 21, I believe the game is. So that's basically where you're just playing blackjack. And that would be accessible. You just swipe up and input, ask for more cards, etc., and it tells you the cards that you already have. They would be very accessible because they're easy, straightforward to do. But my aim is not just to play a game that is specially developed for personal sight loss. It's actually a game that is included. So in the design itself, has been included. So it doesn't really matter what game I play, that it's played by a sighted person. I don't want to play just a blind only game.
Yes, exactly. When talking about The Last of Us Part 2, Harold addressed his dissatisfaction to the unequally distributed effort and the sense of condescension within it.
It's like we have this fantastic tentpole that is amazing and does all this, but what about the rest of the games?
Yeah.
It's like, oh look, we've put all our effort into one game. So there you are. Disabled people can have one game. It's not like we're putting a little bit of accessibility across the platform.
Current situation in accessible gaming is monopolistic. Big game companies monopolize accessibility functions, although basic features like colorblind optimization have been integrated in major game engines like Unreal. Companies like EA Games or Sony Interactive Entertainment still chose not to share their further developments, which lead to the reality that big developers have been reinventing the wheel again and again, while small developers are stuck with basic accessibility functions due to the limit of time and money. If there is one thing that I learned from this fieldwork, it will be that individual condition varies greatly, and the current state of accessibility development is far from being adequate, towards which Stephen argued for open source of accessibility developments.
Where we don't have gamers just keep them to themselves and create their own GDKs inside the company, that they actually make it open source. So basically they could load up to an open source platform like that, or maybe a platform used by a number of the companies to take those GDKs and include it in their engines. So, for example, it would be great if Xbox could do it, and they are getting there. They have their own little kits themselves, but it's not actually open source.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think what needs to happen is we need to invite the accessibility officers from the likes of the big companies. So, for example, EA Games has their own accessibility officer.
Yeah.
So what I understand, so does Sega and other gaming manufacturers. And I think it would be a great idea to bring them together as a conference. And we do also have, the gaming awards, and there is a section area for, I think, was it accessible gaming? But I'm talking about an actual event on its own, where we can actually say, look, it would be great if your kits could actually be made open source, and make it clear we're not asking for proprietary information. It's just kits that would make it easier for all companies, both small and large, to make their games accessible, and then they can tweak it to suit themselves. We're not asking for the sort. We're not asking for the sort code. We're asking just for the code that might actually make, for example, the menu of a game accessible, or to help it maybe make it 3D sound, for example. So someone who was sight lost could actually know that the sniper's to the right, or someone's running with an axe to the left. So it's lines of code like that, or at least information on how to create it, and maybe even a repository for saying, this is what we did, this is what we found that didn't work and what did work.
In our interviews, Harold and Stephen have both told me their depressing experiences of finding playable games. Harold had to purchase a game that he has been looking forward to play, and only later to find out the game is unplayable, while Stephen can only choose from games that were specifically made for blind gamers. Towards this situation, we propose the industry to have accessibility standards that first ensure basic accessibility features to be included in all games, and highlight novel, extended features in particular games, which can potentially be shared across the industry to be the future standards. Laura K. Buzz has explained this issue in detail, and please click the link above to check out. While our current efforts still remains within the frame of making additions to games that has already been made that give more people the ability to enjoy them, there is a step forward from Accessible, which is inclusive and universal. For designs to be inclusive, the major change that needs to happen is the designer's mindset. A perfect example would be, this is accessible, but definitely not inclusive. Everything we talked about was based around the problem-solving mindset, where I frequently mentioned phrases like catering for or addressing needs. Instead, designers should learn to adopt a problem-finding mindset. Stephen brought up a perfect example of 3D sound.
I think I'm happy to see the improvements, and it's nice to see that developers are thinking more about us and trying to be more inclusive, because they do see the benefits, not just in helping people with sight loss, but it actually makes the game more interactive. For even people who can see, like for example, there's a game developer, and this is before 3D sound came out into the masses. They were starting to use it to help people with sight loss. Um, and when they seen how accessible it was, or usable it was for people with sight loss, they went, that's actually sound quite good in our game, and they actually put it in their main game. So, and that was before even it came to the masses. So it's just those are the benefits I see. Now, do I think it's enough? No, I think we could go a lot further, like the creating development kits and have them open source, and that will help a lot of companies, especially small developers, just make a lot better games for us.
Yes. Victor Papanek has said that all people experience being differently abled in some minor or major way throughout or for part of our lives. As abled people, we will also have occasions where we have special needs to certain design. And if we combine all those special needs, we find that we have designed for the majority after all. It's the exclusive designs that are really designed for the minority. Harold and Stephen has mentioned what the gaming industry can do as first steps.
So we do need to have more games that are designed for accessibility. We need to have more games that highlight disability. There need to be more disabled people in games. Like what's saying you can't have a disabled person in a game.
I think the first route we need to go down is have a section for people with disabilities first, to show off what we can do. Yeah. And then when it gets up to a certain volume and see popularity of people with disabilities playing it, no matter the disability, then we ask for total inclusion within the game and within, say, for example, e-gaming.
Yes.
So I think that's the way to go. We need to take it step by step. I would prefer to be included straight away within it, but I think we need to show off to everyone first what we can do as gamers.
Yes.
It's a bit like the Paralympics, for example. Right. The Paralympics came well after the Olympics, and that was because we shown off what we could do, and then they actually gave it.
The inclusive design process necessarily consists of participation by users. Stephen has told me his connection with game developers in his work.
So in relation to gaming, we find a lot of requests coming from developers now, especially with the RNAB pushing more accessible gaming. And while that doesn't really fall under our team per se, we still get the query. So we would provide advice as well as links to get more information. So for example, it could be how to have someone who's totally blind interact with the game, like if it's on an iPhone, have the swipe simple, have it work actually with voiceover, not just have it speak to you, and have the user turn off voiceover to interact with the UI.
Right.
So we are finding more and more developers are becoming a lot more aware and a lot more interactive with our customers. And with the likes of the gaming group on a Thursday, they would host a Discord, and a lot of the developers or those who are interested in gaming would go into the Discord and just uh, have a chance to actually speak to more of our customers and get a better idea, especially in an informal environment, which makes it a lot easier for the developers. They can just be themselves, no matter if it's a single game dev or a company.
The current trend is productive, but there's still rooms to improve. Control over the final project is currently on the developer's side, and we want the power structure to be less rigid by including more disabled members in the crew, and also look for potential community-based design and open design, which by character fit the frequent updating nature of modern games. For more information on those, see the links in the description below. This video has offered many concepts and directions that industry can reference. However, as much as we want to see all the games becoming fully inclusive and universal, the steps are better taken progressively. Only if big companies begin to share their contribution to the engine, the small developers can adhere to standard without the limitation of cost. And only if games become accessible to everyone, no matter their abilities, can disabled groups show off what they can do, which can then lead to fully inclusive industry and market. The speed of this process is unknown, and the final outcome is hard to imagine. What's important is the industry to start now, because only when we hit the road we will regret how much time we wasted packing.
Think of your audience when you're designing your game, and if you believe in inclusion, then the inclusion should also be included in your game, and that's for all people with disabilities.